we are receiving many questions from civil engineers related to pursuing masters in structural engineering in USA. The few questions are as follows. Which university may be considered for the study? What are the pros and cons of different institutes? What is the prospect after completing the masters in USA? What should be my area of specialization in structural engineering, so that there are better chances of getting the job? And many more. In view of the above, the next live technical discussion is planned for helping out the prospects who are exploring further for pursuing masters in structural engineering in USA. Dr. Dilip Catry has kindly agreed to share his insight related to the higher education in USA. Dr. Catry has over 39 years of civil engineering experience involving land development, subdivision, commercial, residential, multifamily, industrial, and educational facilities. He is involved in design, construction, and overall management of major infrastructure improvements comprising sewer, water, storm drain, flood control, and grading design. He also taught structural engineering for more than a decade in USA. Please share this video with the engineers in your circle so that the maximum number of engineers may be benefited.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome Dr. Dilip Catry once again in this unique live technical discussion series.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Most welcome. Today we have a very interesting topic that is, let us say, if you want to pursue masters in structural engineering, or let's say the higher education in USA, then there are many questions which we were receiving. And that's why we thought of arranging this kind of a live discussion. So when we floated this event, we got around 200 plus odd questions, right? So few of them we will cover today. Okay, and we will just begin shortly within couple of minutes. Okay. Yes. Welcome, Vivek. So just to start with, can you please share that what was your journey, and then how could you reach at the level where you are at today?
Yes. So, well, I started when I was in high school, and when I was even before high school, I always loved to draw. And I think that my interest in design came from my interest in drawing. There were two things that I loved to do as a kid. One was drawing, and the other one was photography. So I got interested in pictures and traveling. My father used to take me all over the world, and he used to show me these buildings in different parts of the world. He took me to the biggest dam. He took me to the tallest building. He took me to New York City. He took me to India. And so I developed an interest right from the age of 7, 8 years old that I really liked seeing big things getting built. And so that was what procured my interest. And then when I got a little bit older, I was a teenager, I was a photographer. Just to let you know, so that you know a little bit about my path, I worked as a photographer for 5 years. I was specializing in fashion photography.
Good.
I also worked as an auto mechanic for 2 years. I also did a class in restaurant management because, my father said, oh, let's open an Indian restaurant and have a chain of Indian restaurants. Indians always like to own a business. And after I worked in the restaurant for 4 months, I said, oh my God, this is a terrible business. I don't want to ever do this business. Oh my God, it's so much work. You have to, it's really, really, oh my goodness, restaurant business is very difficult. I did like auto mechanics. The only problem with auto mechanics, I worked as a mechanic for 2 years, is that every day I would come home and my hands would have this grease in the nails. And no matter how hard I tried to scrub, You could never clean your hands. It was always, your hands were always dirty for the rest of your life. So I know that sounds really dumb, but I just didn't like that after a while. But I've always loved cars. And then photography, I very much enjoyed photography. I still enjoy photography, and I'm still doing photography. But, coming from Indian parents, as I'm sure most of the people in the audience know, being a photographer is not exactly, a choice. It's not a choice that we really have, I would like to know how many in the audience would tell their parents that, I'm going to become a photographer, and who's going to be alive after they make that statement. Because I can assure you, if it's not the mother, certainly the dad is going to kill one of them for sure. Okay. Because telling your parents that, I'm going to be an artist is just like a death sentence. So, so my father told me, he said, well, you can do your photography, but first you need to make a living. So he pointed me in the direction of civil engineering, and I really enjoyed it very much in college. And I was so accelerated that I was so interested in school. I've always loved going to school. I love to read, and I love to study. And I know that sounds very awkward, but I did actually enjoy college. So I entered the accelerated program in my high school at the age of 15, and I was taking college classes at the age of 15. So I actually graduated from high school 2 years early. I graduated when I was 16. And then I did accelerated program at the university. So I actually got my bachelor's degree at the age of 18.
Oh, great.
Which is, very unusual. I don't advise that, by the way, because the problem is that you're socially screwed up, because you're 18. I was 18 years old and I started working at a firm. Everybody was 25, 30, and I was 18. But I didn't care because I really liked what I was doing. My very first job was working in the aerospace industry. I was working for the company now is called Boeing, but at the time it was called Rockwell International, and I was working on defense aircraft. I was designing planes for the Air Force, and I was 18 years old, and I just loved that job. It was a great job. And I immediately enrolled for the master's degree. I got my bachelor's degree was from Cal State LA, a state college. And then I enrolled, was accepted, one of the best schools in the world. I got accepted at Caltech for my master's degree. And that master's degree program was a 1-year program. So I finished the master's degree. I took a part-time position at Boeing, which was then Rockwell. And I finished the master's degree in 1 year. So now I was 19. I had a master's degree and I had, a year and a half of experience. And so then I got a job after that working for NASA. I worked for JPL, the very famous organization that sends spacecraft around the world. And I was a civil engineer there. I worked on some very interesting projects, worked on some stuff for the space shuttle, worked on spacecraft, structural design of spacecraft, as well as the whole project management field of designing for space travel. And that was a great experience. I was only 20. Okay. I was already only 20. But my interest was, the thing about, I loved the position at NASA, but it was not my first career choice. My career choice was I wanted to be on Earth. I didn't want to be on Mars. I didn't want to be, flying around, working on. I mean, it's great work. Don't get me wrong. I love watching all the accomplishments of the people at NASA. But it wasn't my number one choice. I wanted to get back on Earth because my field was civil engineering. So I wanted to work on buildings. So at the age of 20, I departed from NASA, and then it was really at that point when I started working in civil engineering. My first job was working for a developer and small home builder, and I was designing homes. And from there, I went on to finish, I went back to school at the age of 21, and I finished my MBA in finance at the University of Southern California. That took me 3 years. And then I was working for a civil engineering firm. And then I also worked for a developer. And by the time I was 25, I had been working for 7 years. And I was, I'll be honest with you, I was quite frustrated. I was not happy. And I said, I said, this engineering career is not taking me anywhere. I was very impatient. I was very difficult to please. I wanted to be the president of the company. Okay. I was only 24 and I wanted to be the president, and I said, why do I have to wait 30 years to be the president? Everybody I looked at, all the companies, all the presidents, they were all bald, and old. And I said, I don't want to wait to be bald and old. I want to be president now. I said, why do I have to wait 30 years? So I had my MBA, I had my master's degree. I said, you should make me an executive now, which was, obviously dumb. Okay. Just stupid. But, when you're 25, you don't think about those things. So I was frustrated, and there were some personal things that were going on in my life also. I got married, and I'm raised in the United States. I'm pretty much an American, although I have a lot of Indian values. But my father and mother took me to India, and they picked a wife for me. Now, see, that formula, I'll be honest with you, okay, that works for Indian people. Doesn't work so well for a dude like me, because I'm from America. She was from India. It's like taking a turkey sandwich and mixing it with a samosa. It's not a good formula, okay? So as much as she was a beautiful woman and she was very intelligent, she graduated from University of Roorkee, and she had 2 master's degrees, and she was 22 and I was 22. And of course, she had a master's degree, so I had a master's degree. So then my parents said, oh, that's a perfect marriage. Let's just get those 2 master's degrees and put them together. You see, and that doesn't work, okay? Because it's not about the education, it's about the relationship. But that's a separate story. We were having a rough time. And so anyway, I was 25, and I was in a difficult situation with the relationship. But I give her this much credit. She gave me a speech which I'll never forget. She said, what's in your heart? What do you really enjoy doing? She made me look inside of myself. It was her idea. And I looked inside myself and I said, well, what do I really enjoy doing? I love math, and I love structures, and I love engineering. Because I got a job as an executive. I was an executive for 2 years. I was on a fast track on the career ladder. I did that job I realized, even though I had an MBA, I had project management skills, and I'm doing pretty good at the job, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And I kept on telling myself while I was in this job, I had a beautiful office. I was up on the 14th floor of a high-rise building. I had a view of the Los Angeles airport. I had a secretary. I had a blah, blah, all this stuff, beautiful office. People would kill for a job like that, okay? And I was only 23. And I worked it. And in the beginning, I was very excited. I used to go to work, I got my office. I got the view. I got this. I got that. I got a phone, a table, a desk. I was only 23. But after 2 years, I didn't like it. And I kept on asking myself, why am I not happy? And the reason that I wasn't happy, because I wasn't doing any design work and I wasn't doing structural engineering. I was giving orders to people. I had people reporting to me because I was a manager. And I didn't like it, because all day long I'm on the phone. All day long I'm on the phone. I'm in a meeting. I'm here. I'm there. I didn't feel that I was being challenged. So my wife at the time, she said, well, what do you really like to do? I said, I love math. I want to design something. I want to design a bridge or design a building. I don't want to be sitting there on the phone all day long for the rest of my life to be doing that. It didn't fit with me. So I made a radical shift. I ended up going back to school for my doctorate at the age of 25. Now, I know that seems not so radical now, I guess, but I was kind of wandering and I was lost. And the reason I'm telling you this story, because there's a lot of people that are watching this who I'm sure are also wandering and lost. And that's the reason I wanted to do this presentation, because I want everyone to know that even I was wandering and lost, okay? Because it takes time to find what you want. And you can't listen. I mean, you listen to your parents. I agree, parents mean the best for you, but you really can't listen to them to find who you are. You have to find who you are. Because, you know, your parents, they mean well for you, but they don't know what you want. And this is something which is a big difference between Indian culture and American culture. American culture, you know, we believe in independence of the mind, independence of the heart. In Indian culture, it's very much about tradition. What will your father say? What will your grandfather say? What will your relatives say? What will they think? What will they think? Oh, you can't do this. Oh, you can't fall in love with this girl. You know, screw it. Do it. Do what's in your heart. Because what's going to happen is you're going to end up being very unhappy. So I went back to school at the age of 25. I quit the executive job, right? And I became a professor. And I took a huge salary cut and went back to school. But guess what? I was very happy. I really loved it. And I said, I'm going to be a professor. And at the age of 25, I said to myself, I said, you know, I'm done with this industry stuff. I don't want to go to industry anymore. I'm so fed up with those people. I don't have nothing to do with them. So I said, you can see what happened in the end. But anyway, I said, I'm going to be a professor. And I was a professor for 9 years. And I got my PhD. It took me 7 years to get my PhD. PhD is a very difficult degree. Okay. So we're going to talk about that a little bit in today's talk about whether or not it's, you know, is it worth it? For me, it was definitely worth it, but it's not worth it for everybody.
Yes.
So after 9 years at the university, I wrote 2 textbooks. I published all these papers, and it got to the point, because I was teaching the classes, right? It got to the point where I could go to the class. I knew the book so well, I didn't even need any notes. I would just go to class, start writing on the chalkboard, you know. And a student would ask me a question. I already knew what question he was going to ask before he asked it because I had been teaching the class for so long. And so, cut a long story short, a lot of things changed in my life at the age of 33. I had a son. The marriage failed. Okay, I'm sorry to say, but it failed. It was bound to fail because we were just 2 different people. There's nothing wrong with admitting that. She was raised in a completely different culture than me. We had fundamentally different views on a lot of things. But be that as it may, that's the way it happened. But I left the university because I said to myself, you know, here's the way you can find out. Here's a little tool that the audience can relate to. If you want to pick a certain career path, look at other people that are in that career path who are much older than you, obviously, and ask yourself, do you want to become like that? That's the question. So I looked at my other faculty members and who were much older than me, because I was the youngest professor. I was 25 when I became a professor. All the other faculty were over 40, over 50. And I looked at them, and they had a very good life. They used to work 4 days a week, and they had Fridays off, and they would play golf and all this stuff. And I asked myself, I go, is that what you want to be? Do you want to be like that? And the answer was no. I don't want to be like that. Okay. Because to me, it was just too easy. You have your pension, you have everything is planned out for you. There was no challenge left. And I said, I'm going to teach these same classes for the next 30 years. I think I'm going to have to jump off of a balcony because I can't do it. So I left, which very few professors leave, by the way. Most professors, they stay there forever. But I left. And I'm glad that I left. And I'm also very grateful that I taught for 9 years, because I think it made me a better person and a better engineer. It taught me a lot about people and how to deal with students and stuff. And I really enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed the whole university setup, but it was just too stagnant for me. So I left. And then from there, I started my own firm. I was 33. I'm 56 now. I actually started the firm when I was 26. I've been in my own company for 20 years. Or excuse me, no, 30 years. 30 years. And I did work for some other big firms in between. So I'm very proud to say that I have experience working for myself, working for the university, working for the government, because I worked for NASA, working for the government as a professor, working in the private sector. I've tasted a lot of different pies. And it took me a while, and I don't think it really sunk into me until I was about 40 or 42 that what I really am enjoying to do, I mean, accepting what I really love to do. And I've been very happy since I made that decision. And I'm very happy with what I'm doing now. And I feel that it's the right place for me. I feel comfortable. It's kind of like choosing a career is like choosing a suit. Okay. If you ever go to get a suit made, you put on the jacket. Some jacket's a little tight. You try to reach up to change the light bulb and the jacket rips, then that's not the right jacket. You need to put on the jacket that fits, because you're going to wear it for the rest of your life. Okay. So, your career is not, a career is different from a jacket, but you got to get the right fit. Because if you're gonna do it for a long time, then it's got to fit. And this is something that when I was a professor, when I became a professor at the age of 25, I used to think to myself, I can teach anybody anything to become an engineer. And after 2 years, I realized that is not true. there are people who are just not built for this profession. Not because they're not valuable. They have value in other places. And that's the thing that, in India, what I've noticed, well, I grew up in an Indian family. My father was from India. He was from Sindh, and he left during the partition. So he was a very traditional Indian father. So was my mother. But Indian culture tends to force people to fit a certain mold. And I'm here to tell you that you don't have to do that. Okay. And sometimes your path will be very difficult. My path has been very difficult. I've had a lot of roadblocks and a lot of setbacks, a lot of disappointments, and I've had lots of failures also. I've failed at things. There have been jobs that I have not been able to, please my boss or please my client. I'll admit it. But, that's part of the learning process. It's part of the growing process. And eventually you toughen up and you become, what I call a hardened military veteran. You can stand the bullets, and you just pick up and you keep going, and eventually you'll find your place. But if you're not enjoying what you're doing, then don't do it. I'm fortunate that I enjoy what I do, and I'm pretty good at it, that I'm able to make a living at it. I am not on a government pension. I don't depend on the government. I have my own business. I have employees that depend on me. And I'm very happy with where I am. So I know that's a long, drawn-out answer, but there was a lot of information there that I wanted to share. And particularly with the audience that we have, understanding that I'm coming at it from an American perspective, to think independent of your parents. I'm not saying you ignore what your parents say. I'm not saying you throw it in the trash. Listen to them. but you have to find what's in here.
Yes.
And because if you're not happy, it's not going to work. You're going to be terrible at it. There are certain projects that I don't want to do. I can give you plenty of examples, okay? And I don't do them because I know that I'm not going to be happy with it. I'm going to hate it. So let somebody else do that.
Yes.
You know, there's certain contracts. When I was working for a big firm, we used to do a lot of government contracts. And government contracts are very difficult to manage because you have all these rules. You know, the U.S. government comes and hits you with all these rules that you have to follow. But fortunately, in a big company, we have a lot of people. It's a big staff, so other people can handle those rules, and I can handle what I handle, so it can work. But like for me to handle a government contract, being a small firm, we can't do it. We're too small. So we will work through another firm. So there's ways that you can, find your way to work. But anyway, that's a little bit about me. And right now, I'm very happy with where I am in my life. My son right now, he's 26 and he's finding his way. He has to find his own way. I can't give it to him. It's not something like you can give it to him in a box, You have to find your own path. You have to find where you belong. Yeah.
Yes. Great. Okay. Okay. So can we share that small presentation which you have shared?
Yeah. Let's bring the slide up and we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Just let me share it.
I think this is the second slide. There should be a first slide which has the university. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So I put this slide together because I I looked at some of the questions and I thought it would be nice to just give a little brief overview of the industry, the profession, and give you an overview of the U.S. market. So the first thing is, as an industry, we're approximately 250,000 civil engineers. It might be a little bit more than that. It might be 280,000, somewhere in that range across the United States. Okay. And out of that 280,000, approximately 90,000 are licensed professional engineers. So it's like, what is that? About a third. About a third of the profession is licensed. And out of that licensed profession, maybe 8,000 are structural engineers and 5,000 are geotechnical engineers. And the reason I bring that up, that's the first thing I want to mention to you. If your ambition is to go far in your career in the United States, the license is very important because you will not be able to reach really any position of responsibility until you have a PE license. If your goal is to be a specialist, then the structural license, the geotechnical license, depending on what field, of course, structures or geotechnical, is very important. Now, this is in the practical world. If your goal is to be a professor and to be in the university, then the license is not so important. It's your PhD and where you get your PhD. So I laid out a little flow chart to give you some structure to help you think about, for those of you that want to pursue higher education in this country, how do you do it? So step number one, look at yourself and ask yourself, where do you want to go? What's your goal? Do you want to work in the profession, practice? Do you want to work in education? Do you want to work in research? Because these are fundamentally different paths. They require a different type of training. And it's like a road that splits, into two different paths or three different roads. And so you have to first think about which direction do you want to go in. In my case, I jumped roads several times, which is fortunate and also unfortunate because I spent a lot of time in the university. I have 4 degrees. But I'm not regretting that. I'm very happy that I did that. It gave me a very powerful resume. And when I go and compete for projects, I have good credentials, which I'm very proud of from some very good schools. So it's not lost. But if you have a specific path in mind, getting a PhD may not be necessary in your path. Getting an MBA may not be necessary, or maybe you go that particular path. So first thing is to think about what you want. And that's really hard to do when you're in your 20s. Some people really don't know what they want to do. They're not sure. So in that event, you need to maybe work a little bit, spend a little time and get to know yourself and see what fits. If you know what you want, you'll get there much faster. Number 2, research the universities. And I'll help you. I have some slides to talk about that. I'll give you a little overview of the university and the whole education system in the United States. And then look at the cost, because it's not cheap anymore. It used to be, when I graduated from college in 1983, my bachelor's degree, my tuition was $85 per quarter. My total bachelor's degree for my undergraduate was less than $2,000. That was in 1983. That's almost 40 years ago. Now, that same degree is costing at least $50,000 to $60,000 from a state college. If you want to do it from a prestigious college, it's going to be well over almost $250,000. And this is a huge problem. So we'll talk about costs in a minute, but do look at the costs, because again, for PhD students, they have stipends and they have student support. But for master's degree students who are only interested in a master's degree, universities don't fund you. You have to pay the tuition or take a loan. And that's a big expense. And then what degree do you want to pursue? Do you want to pursue a master's in engineering, an MBA, a PhD? These are very important considerations, and it all goes back to step number 1. What direction do you want to go in? And always remember, in the end, step number 5, experience always governs. It doesn't matter what your degrees are. In the end, the degree is only a tool to help you to get the experience that you need to be in the career that you want. And building a career is a lifelong process. It doesn't end. You're always building your career. It's a lifelong process. Now, if you take these numbers that we have here, the 250,000, and let's say you compare our profession with, say, the medical profession or the legal profession, we're much smaller. The number of doctors, according to U.S. Department of Labor, is somewhere around, I think it's around 600,000 licensed physicians. And then you have approximately 650, or I think it's 700,000 practicing lawyers. Out of 700,000 practicing lawyers, 400,000 are in 2 cities, which is New York and Washington, D.C. And then, of course, every major city has a high concentration of lawyers. So we're like a third of the legal profession and the medical profession. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about universities. You can classify the graduate schools into 2 broad categories. I put them in 2 buckets. There's the research universities, bucket A, if you will, and the practical schools, bucket B. And this is probably the most important piece of information that they'll never tell you. If you look at all the research universities, look on the left column, you see all these big names, right? You see Berkeley, Caltech, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, MIT. This is just a few of them. There's a whole bunch of them. And then you look on the right-hand side, you have the, quote, lesser prestigious campuses like Cal State University, 19 campuses in California. You have all the public and the state colleges. You have the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, although they all are also doing research. They also have a pretty good graduate program. They have a medical school and they have a law school as well. But look at the difference in the costs. You know, UC Berkeley right now is running $30,000 a year. Now, the tuition is roughly $20,000, and then it's $10,000 according to them for living expense. But on $10,000 a year, you'll be eating potato chips. Okay, it's probably going to cost you more than that. Caltech is around 60. Stanford is like 80. Harvard is 80. These schools are very expensive. I went to two of them. I went to University of Southern California and I went to Caltech, and then my bachelor's degree was from Cal State LA. So I have been in both sides of the bucket. What you need to understand is that the Category A research universities are very expensive. Yes, it's very prestigious. You'll have a nice name on your resume, no question about it. But it is mostly a theory-based education with less practical emphasis. It's basically gearing the graduates from those schools are mostly being geared for research because the people who teach at those universities are research professors. Now, I'm not saying you can't get a good education there, but if your goal is to reach industry and your goal is to work, you can get just as good an education from Category B, the state colleges, for a much cheaper price. And you'll probably get hired much faster because one of the issues that some employers have had with some of the big name schools is, people coming out of some of these schools have very high aspirations. They have high expectations. They have high salary requirements. They don't want to climb up the ladder. They feel that they've come from a special place, and that can work in some places, but most private sector firms, they want people that can work with a team. When I hire somebody, what am I looking for? Yes, I like to have somebody who's smart. I like to have somebody who comes from a good school. Certainly, no question about it. I like somebody with good skills. But the number one quality I'm looking for, number one, is the ability to work with a team, is to be able to work with others. Because if you can't work with others, what am I going to do with you? You can't work in a room by yourself. You've got to work and interact with other people. So social skills are very important. And so I caution you to just have this sort of Mercedes and Rolls-Royce attitude in picking your school. Just because it's Caltech or UC, and I graduated from Caltech, so I can say this with some authority. Just because you come from one of the schools in the Category A does not give you the privilege or the right to look down on anybody in the Category B. Because you'll find that when you get into industry, when you start working, in the end, it's not the degree or the credential that really is going to dictate your path. It's going to be your skills and your ability to work with other people. That's what's going to propel you. Now, if your goal is you want to be a faculty member at Berkeley, you want to be a research professor at Caltech or MIT, then you have to go on Category A. You have no choice, because that group of universities hires from each other. They hire, and your goal is number one, PhD, 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 and then you have to publish and do research. That's a different path. And if that's your goal, then you need to go in that path. But if your goal is to work, you have more choices. Let's go to the next slide. So I've kind of given you a brief list of the different disciplines. There is, of course, the one that I work in, which is structures. Structures has become a major entry-level requirement. Is you need a master's degree just to enter. It used to be that you could come in with a bachelor's and learn, but those days are gone. Now companies want to see a master's degree as a minimum. And you have to remember that the path to becoming a structural engineer takes a minimum of 7 to 10 years after you graduate. There are 2 licenses you need to get. At least the PE license for sure. And if you can get the SE license, it's a bonus. But there are a lot of qualified structural engineers who don't have an SC license, and they've been practicing for years, so I'm not going to downplay their expertise. But to be a specialist, yes, the SC license is very valuable. But it takes 7 to 10 years to really call yourself a structural engineer. When you graduate, you start from zero and you have to put in your time. The same thing with the geotechnical engineering profession, which is a wonderful career choice. And again, the master's degree is very valuable. And again, 7 to 10 years is the standard climb for the geotechnical engineer. And then I kind of lumped the other categories in one column there, which is number 3, although they are very much specialty fields, but I wanted to keep the slide to a minimum. You have environmental civil engineering, you have the water and wastewater treatment engineer, you have the hydrologist, storm drain designer, and their experience, again, 7 to 10 years to build your career in that field. You also have the traffic engineering discipline, and traffic engineers are very much in high demand. We have one thing we have in the United States is same thing with India. We have too many cars. And again, the PE license is very valuable, and what they call LEED certification, which is a special classification for people that are trained in sustainability. That's also a very valuable certification. And then the TE is the licensed transportation engineer. And then the 4th category, which is project and construction management. Now and I've done that, I've worked in that field. I was a project manager, I've been a construction manager. In that field, what you will need at some point is you will need the certified project manager designation, the CPM, which will give you the industry standard so that you can function as a certified project manager. The PE license is not really required in that discipline, but it's a plus. Are we still online? I don't think I can hear you, Bhavan. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm just sharing the document again.
Did we lose any connection during that, or were we able to hear everything I was saying?
No, it is perfect. It was just only the document. Yeah, I just wanted to put it back.
Okay, thank you. So on the project management and the construction management track, the certified project manager, which is a designation in the industry, is very valuable. That's really what you need. And we'll talk about salaries in a minute. One thing to emphasize is if you elect to go down category on what I call number 4, and you don't develop your technical skills, it will be very hard for you to jump back. Okay. Number 4 is kind of like its own independent track. And people who become project managers, construction managers, they generally will just stay. They'll stay in that discipline for the balance of their career. Not that that's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But you just need to remember that, and I was on that track at some point, but you can't jump back and forth. I personally did make the jump, and I've been in the structures field for 30 years plus, and I love it. But you have to make that decision at some point because you can't really be jumping back and forth. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is, of great concern to a lot of people, how much money am I going to make? I hear this all the time. How much money? What is this career really worth? And blah, 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 and all that stuff. So I put some numbers together for you. Now, remember that there are 2 things that dictate salary: location and, of course, the market demand, supply and demand. So In the technical fields, the starting salary in the private sector is, generally speaking, lower than most public sector jobs, at least in California. That's not the case in other parts of the country. So I've given you an approximate range. And it varies, it varies, obviously. In Los Angeles, the salaries are much higher because the cost of living is higher. San Francisco, the salary is much higher because the cost of living is higher. New York, the cost of living is higher. In Texas, the cost of living is much lower, but the salary won't be that much lower. So you have to you don't just look at the salary, you have to look at the location, because your cost of living, like, for example, let's talk about San Francisco right now, or San Jose, the Silicon Valley. The cheapest house there is like $1.5 million. So even if you get a salary for $100,000 a year, you're going to be renting an apartment. Unless you got a rich uncle who's going to help you buy that house. It's going to take you a while to buy a house. But if you work in Las Vegas with $60,000 a year, you can buy a house pretty fast. Buy a house probably within 3 years. So the salary may be lower, but the cost of living is much less. So you have to look at those two parameters. In the long term, on the technical side, if you work in a private sector company, you can hit, $250,000 a year after a certain number of years. You can get there. If you stay in the public sector, you can also hit $200,000 to $300,000 a year. Those salaries are there. Again, that's in the long-term horizon. And, you need at least 10 years to call yourself an engineer, because you're not an engineer until you become licensed. So that's on the technical track. That's structures, geotechnical, traffic engineers. Then the same thing is for the environmental, water, hydrology, sanitation. Those careers tend to be mostly in the public sector. They are also there in the private sector. You'll be working for a consulting firm, generally speaking, a large consulting firm. What happens to a lot of graduates is they get attracted to Category 2, the project and construction management track, because in general, that track pays a higher salary. It is also more demanding. So right now, I know graduates with a bachelor's or a master's degree in construction management, once they get to the right firm, they're getting starting around $85,000, $90,000 a year in Los Angeles and in New York. And they make a very steep climb. So they tend to get paid more, but the job is more demanding. I mean, of course, all the jobs are demanding, but that job in particular, if you're working for a private construction company, you'll be working 10 to 12 hours a day. You're not going to be working 40 hours a week. And if you work in the public sector, again, there's a fairly steep rise, but it's at a slower pace. It'll take you 10, 12 years to get to the 200,000, 250,000. But you have to look at locations. So location matters a lot in civil engineering. There are probably 3 locations. California is one of them. New York, that pay the best or highest salary because the cost of living is so high. But the state that has the highest salaries for civil engineers is Alaska, because nobody wants to go there because it's too cold, But Alaska, you will be very well paid. The benefits are very good. The oil companies, they need engineers to go to Alaska. And if you can stand it, if you can do it, it's a beautiful state. Alaska actually pays you to move there. There's actually a tax credit. And the cost of living is high in Alaska. The cost of housing is high, but the salary is high. And the Alaska license is expensive. I have the PE license in Alaska. I had to take a class in designing with snow and ice. That was 15 years ago? That class cost me $4,000 so that I could qualify to get the PE license. So the license is expensive. Everything is expensive in Alaska, but the salary is high. So these are just some parameters. And if if you're into the money thing, and I know a lot of young people are into the money thing, they want to make a lot of money. So you have to go to places where nobody else wants to go. So where's that? Well, Alaska pays very well. Dubai, very highly paid. If you go and work for a firm in Dubai, the salaries there are much, much higher. If you go work for an oil company and you're ready to go and work in Angola or Nigeria, you'll be very well paid. Colombia, you'll be very highly paid. But think about where you're going. Okay. You're going to go to Angola and Nigeria, you need like 5 vaccinations. Okay. If you want to work in the oil industry and work on an offshore oil platform, you'll be very highly paid. So we have jobs where you can make the mucho dollars. Okay. But, you're going to be on an oil. You want to be in Angola, where they have dengue fever and they have, Ebola in Nigeria. If you're ready to do that, yes, there's jobs for you. Shell Oil Corporation is operating in Nigeria. They're operating in Angola. There's lots of jobs in Dubai. But, I had a student of mine. I'll tell you a short story. I had a student of mine, very bright guy. He graduated. He went to work for the Army Corps of Engineers. And they sent him to Afghanistan. And he worked in Afghanistan for, I think, 5 years. And he was less than 10 years of experience, but he's a very bright kid. I wouldn't call him a kid anymore, but he became a project manager. He was making at least $250,000 a year in Afghanistan. And I met him for lunch, and he told me about that job. And he said, when he had to go for a site inspection, they put him in a Humvee, and he was surrounded by a bunch of military people with guns. And he wasn't sure if he was going to get blown up by a IED. See, for me, it's not worth it. That's my opinion. But, I'm sure he made at least $500,000 in 2 years. And you have to take an assignment. Well, this is when the U.S. was in Afghanistan. So the jobs are there. But you remember, you have to give something up in order to do that.
Yes.
So anyway, that's my brief little overview, and I'm open to further discussion, question, answer, or wherever you'd like to take the conversation.
Yeah, great. So people are appreciating this discussion. Yeah. So there are a few messages from Bahrain, and so thank you, Sachin. He is finding this is an excellent topics and too insightful. Yeah.
That's nice to hear. I'm glad to see that people are awake.
Yeah. So you have covered nicely the brief about all the questions what you have received. So I'll quickly put up the questions which we have received in their own language.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So this is one question. Like, are there any master's courses in USA with industry focus, and do they have ME courses also apart from MS?
Yes. The answer is yes. I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, if your goal is to become, say, a project manager, right? You don't want to deal with technical stuff. You don't want to be doing a design or whatever. You want to be a project manager. You don't really need a master's degree to be a project manager. You don't have to go. I mean, it's nice. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. But you don't have to go and do an MBA from Harvard or do a master's degree in construction management from, I'll pick a school, UC Berkeley or whatever, which is going to cost you $100,000 to go do it. You can do what's called certificate in training. And these are offered. This is a shorter program. It's like 10 classes. I know UCLA offers one. I know USC offers one. But now, even the industry, which is the Construction Management Association of America, they have certificate programs that you can do online, which will cost you, a fraction of the cost, maybe a couple $1,000s. You can get that certificate, and then you can get proficient in certain software. And the software that they're interested in is project management software, which is 2 major programs. I don't know what they're using right now, but Microsoft Project is one of them. The other one is Primavera. So you can get those specific skills that the industry wants at a much cheaper cost, and you put that on your resume, you get hired right away. as opposed to another person who gets a master's degree from, and I'm not picking on Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech is a big research school, and he spends $100,000 or $90,000 to get a master's degree, but he doesn't know Primavera. You're going to get the job before him. So there are shortcuts. It all depends on, what you want.
Yes. Can you tell what is the process of admission in USA for masters in structural engineering?
So the process of admission is they will require, if you're coming from India, so it's no secret that United States, and also European universities have, I hate to use the word, but I got to use it. They have a caste system. Just like India has a caste system, the universities have a caste system, okay? So they have the top tier, caste number one. And so the top universities in the U.S., which, your Caltech, your MIT, your Berkeley's, that category A, if you are coming from IIT, you are going to have a pretty smooth transition. If you have references and you have good scores, your chance of getting admission at those top tier schools is much higher. But if you are not coming from a top tier school, you're coming from other schools, which there are a lot of good schools in India. One thing that I really admire, the Indian educational system is one of the best in the world. You have plenty of other opportunities. So first thing is look at the school where you're going, and their admission requirements are specific to that school. But you also have to look at the what we call the ratio of applications to acceptance. Okay, like Stanford University gets 26,000 applications for the bachelor's degree, and they admit like 1,000. Their master's program is far smaller. So if, for example, you were going to choose Stanford University, you're going to be in a very competitive circle. And yes, you need that, English exam or whatever that thing is called, TOEFL or whatever. It used to be called TOEFL. I don't know what it's called now. You need that. You don't really need a good GRE score, but I'll tell you what the most powerful tool is for getting in, which no one will tell you, but I'll tell you. You need a good reference from a faculty member who is known by those faculty members, because faculty members tend to admit students who come from universities where they know those faculty members because they worked on other projects together. And that's where the research connection comes in, because if a professor at Roorkee University or IIT Bombay recommends you, and he knows, and the people at Stanford and USC, I'll talk about USC in a minute. If they know that faculty, they know that university, then they feel that student is not going to be a disappointment. But if they get a reference from a faculty member from some school that they never heard of, that has less value. I'll say this really quickly. You go to University of Southern California, USC, where I went to school. The largest student organization on campus is, guess who? The Indian Students Association is the largest student organization, almost 2,000 students. So one good thing is, coming from India, I'll tell you this, you have a good reputation. Indians have a very good reputation in the technical fields, because there have been thousands of students that have come before you that have done wonderful work. And so you're in good company.
Yeah, this is one question. Like, now I am taking civil engineering, major in construction engineering management. Is it recommended to pursue masters in structures?
So in that case, if your goal is to stay in construction management, masters in structural is kind of like over here. It's a completely different path. Now, if you're having a change of heart and you say, I don't want to do construction management, I want to do detailed, highly technical analysis. Because remember, the personality of these two professions, these two careers, is very different. Construction management, you have to be a people person. You got to be on the phone all day long. You're going to have angry people calling you saying, oh, the crane is not here. Where's the damn crane? See, I don't want to do that. I don't want people calling me asking me where's the crane. I go talk to somebody else. Okay, that's not what I like to do. So that's a different career. I like structures because I like to work on highly technical analysis where I can sit at my office, do my work, and nobody bothers me with whether the crane is there or the water line broke. I don't want to deal with that nonsense. Okay. I did. So the answer to your question is you got to define what you want. You don't need a master's in structural engineering to be a construction manager, but you have to make sure, is that really what you like?
Yeah, this is one question. Like, while pursuing master's degree in USA, should it be a thesis based or non-thesis program is also fine?
So that's a great question. I personally think, I'll give you my recommendation, and then I'll tell you what the shortcut is. Okay, the shortcut is if you want the master's degree in 1 year, you do the non-thesis. You do the degree program, which has no thesis, and they might have a comprehensive exam. That's if you want the degree fast and you want to get out fast. Now, I personally think the thesis is good training for you to learn how to write, because I'll tell you very quickly, the biggest detriment to a person's career in engineering is that, oh my God, the engineers can't write. They can't write and they can't talk. This is a huge, huge disadvantage. So I personally think the thesis program is a good exercise to learn how to write. But it will add to your time, because the thesis program will take at least 1.5 years. It might take 2 years. But I think it's good training. But if your goal is, hey, I don't want to deal with that, I'll learn how to write later, I don't need to do a thesis, I just want my master's degree and I want to go to work, then you do the non-thesis program.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Suman is asking, what is about PhD in USA?
So that's PhD, not PDH, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, so PhD, the PhD program, if you do it at the proper universities, is a minimum. Some people say they do it in 3 years. I don't believe them. It's a minimum 5-year commitment. It could be as much as 7 years. It took me 7 years because I was working and I had it took me 7 years. I mean, USC, it's a research-based college. If you're going to do PhD at MIT or Berkeley or Caltech, you're going to be there for 5 years. And you're going to be, I hate to say it, you're going to be poor because you're not going to be able to make any money.
Yes.
And so PhD, I think a PhD is reserved for those. There's 2 categories of people that should think about a PhD. One is the university type of person that wants to stay in the university, teach, do research, publish. For them, that's the path. You have no other choice. You have to follow that path. One of the things that I give credit to my PhD program that it taught me, which I'm grateful for, but I wasn't grateful at the time, is it taught me eternal patience. I'm very patient. And I think that was I was not like that when I was, before I entered the PhD program, I was not like that. After I finished the PhD program, I was definitely much more patient, and endurance to withstand for 7 years to stick to a program needs a lot of commitment.
Yes.
7 years to stay to a degree. I mean, I'll tell you right now, in California, the average marriage doesn't last 7 years, okay? Let alone people staying with a college degree program. So it will teach you patience. It will teach you discipline. It will teach you, and it will make you so immersed into your subject because you will dig very deep. So it has a lot of good qualities, but for practicing, if your goal is to work in industry and you want to own a company or you want to be a manager, it's not necessary. As a matter of fact, I don't think you will last. I don't think you can do it. Because if you don't have the patience and the endurance, you have to follow what your advisor tells you to do. lack of a better term, it's a very painful process. But
Yeah.
I think it made me a better man personally. I think I did the right thing.
Yes. Okay. So can you please share your quick experience on forensic engineering?
So, Mr. Solomon, I did an interview for him, by the way, in Venezuela. So thank you for saying hello and thanks for attending today's
Yeah.
talk. Well, I've been working in forensic engineering. So my career, 39 years, I've been working in forensic engineering for like 27 years. And I really enjoy that aspect of the industry because I get to design new buildings, and then I also get to look at sick buildings, as I call them, buildings that have failed, that have problems. And that, I think, makes me a better designer. A lot of design engineers, they don't get to see their work after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I'm working on buildings that are 100 years old. And there's a tremendous learning experience there, which I get to learn from one building to the next. And it's a highly specialized field. And a lot of big firms don't do that type of work. It's a boutique type of practice, which is good because then that gives opportunity for smaller firms to proliferate. But
Yes.
I enjoy it, and I've been working in that discipline for a long time now.
Like how to compare the standards or say ratings of different institutes with respect to structural engineering department? Any quick thoughts on this?
So you have in the United States, we work under a general practice of design, which is the International Building Code. That's our standard, which is it used to be we had 3 different building codes in the United States, but we consolidated them. And so we have our standard, which applies in the United States. Most of Central America and South America follows the US codes. You go to Europe, they have a separate code, which is the Euro code. I've done a lot of work in Europe, so I'm familiar with Euro code. Australia has a separate code. I'm also licensed in Australia. One of the things I love about my career is that I work all over the world. India has their own code.
Yes.
Okay. So there's the Indian code. So the standards are there. At the end of the day, civil engineering is still civil engineering. We work with 4 materials: masonry, concrete, steel. Well, you guys don't work with it, but we work with wood. And, not a lot has changed between masonry and concrete since the Romans, except that now we have mechanized materials. We have mechanized machinery. But each what I call sphere, which is the Western sphere in the United States, has its own standards and codes, American Society of Civil Engineers, and the Europeans have their own standards, which are somewhat similar to the American standards, but it's a European code. It's metric. It has completely different design protocols. Australia has a separate code. And then there is also the British code. The British will never accept what's Europeans. They got to have their own code because they're very independent. So there's a British code also. Mm-hmm. So depending on where you want to live and where you want to work, choose your location, and that becomes your specialization. If you want to work internationally, give yourself some time. It takes a long time to build up the experience. Remember, I didn't start yesterday. I started a long time ago. It's been 4 decades, and I'm still having fun. So I'm not quitting either. But just keep in mind, patience. Patience is very important.
Yes. Okay, Sachin is appreciating this talk, and he is telling you that please keep on delivering such knowledge for the benefits of lost expertise. Yeah.
Very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think this was a common question which was coming up, like what should be the area of specialization in view of better job prospects?
So I used to do this when I was a student. I would read magazines. Oh, this career is paying this much. This one is paying this much. Go in that direction because the salary is higher. Okay, so I'll tell you real quickly. All right, the number one profession in civil engineering that pays the highest is petroleum. because again, you got to go work in Angola and you got to go work in Nigeria. You're going to go work in Colombia. Yeah, they pay the highest. Now, do you want to do that? See, so I don't think you should necessarily, I mean, you should look at the prospects. Yes, you should definitely pay attention to that. At the moment, right now in the United States, there's jobs in all of these different disciplines. There's jobs for structural engineers, there's jobs for traffic engineers, civil engineers. The demand is there and it's continuing to grow. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I would be more look at it from a different perspective, which is what discipline do I want to work in? What organization do I want to work for? Do I want to work in the government or do I want to work in the private sector? You know, if your goal is stability, if you want to have a pension and you want to have stability, the government sector has always been the safest route. But you need to decide, you know, like you have to decide for yourself, is that really where I belong? See, for me, I worked in the government operations. I was a professor for 9 years. I worked for NASA for 3 years. And you know, it worked for me at the time, but I know myself very well. There's no way I can last there for 30 years. Are you kidding? I won't make it. Now, my sister, she's a civil engineer. She has been working for the city of LA her whole career, and she's happy. She loves it. So it all depends, you know, what your personality. But right now, all disciplines are hiring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Satyam is telling that if he wants to pursue career in high-rise structures after completing MS in structural engineering from UIC Chicago, for example, and working recognized company like SOM,
Yeah.
will my deep focus on subjects related to my interest like design of concrete structures and tall buildings be okay, or also I need to focus on other subjects like steel composite structure for getting EIT, or let's say the state license, etc.
Well, so you first of all, you need to get the EIT out of the way. If you haven't done that, that needs to be done first. Before you decide what you're going to do, you got to get that thing out of the way, because without the EIT, you cannot get the PE. So EIT is a general exam that deals with physics and chemistry and, oh my God, all this stuff that I've forgotten. You need to finish that thing, get it out of the way, because otherwise, the longer you wait, the more problems you're going to have, because you're going to forget all that stuff. That's the first thing. Then second thing is, if your goal is to work, see, a company like Skidmore, Owings and Merrill specializes in high-rise buildings. So they're going to be working with mostly two kinds of materials, concrete and steel. And if that's your goal, if that's what you want to do, then a master's degree in structures, specializing in structural dynamics, is the direction you want to go in. And then the practical training in the design of concrete and steel, you will learn that on the job. And then you got to stay focused in that discipline, and you'll rise up the ladder within a company like that, or a competitor, depending on, you know, where you end up being. That would be the path that I would recommend.
Yes.
Oh, and then you must get your PE license and you must get your SC license.
I have completed bachelor's 6 years before and now willing to pursue MS in USA. So how difficult it is getting job after MS and also admission?
Well, getting the admission, I think, you know, choosing the right school, you'll get admission. You have to research the school, and then of course you have to be able to pay for it, because students who come for master's degree will not get any financial support. So you have to be able to pay for it. So you have to choose a school which you can afford. Now, getting the job after that is a tricky question, because mainly it's the immigration status, because all the good jobs will be reserved for U.S. citizens. So that generally will rule out any possibility of getting hired by a government agency like the U.S. government or the city of LA, city of San Francisco, they will require U.S. citizenship. They will not sponsor. So for foreign students coming to the United States that are doing a master's degree, and I have hired many foreign students in my company, they need to find a sponsor. Someone has to give them a chance to get training. So you have to first get admitted for the master's degree. When you're in your master's program, then you have to get approved for what's called practical training, OPT, optional practical training. You get up to 3 years. I think it's up to 3 years. And while you're doing OPT, then a company has to sponsor you for the H-1B. So it's a long, long path. Now that path, I mean, the good news is that path has become open again under the current administration. President Biden has reopened that. It was getting shut by the previous administration. So the opportunities are more available now. But you know, the H-1B visa program has a quota, and I forgot what the number is, 200,000 or 250,000. Congress sets the quota every year, and then in April, everybody applies for this thing, and you know the applications get filled like within 24 hours, and then there's like a lottery system to pick who gets an H-1B. So it has always been a treacherous process, but it's become more open now again. It was getting closed under the previous administration, but now it's more available. But here's how you can, I mean, there are some ways to get through that process, but you have to make some sacrifices, you know. And I will tell you, who are the people that get sponsored? Okay, so here's the honest to goodness truth, which, you know, you may not want to hear, but here's the truth. Where America is short is in the technical skills. And that's not just in civil engineering. That's in computer programming, computer science, structural engineering. This is where America has the shortage. The American graduates are unable to fill those positions. And so industry has to import the talent. This applies not just in technical for civil engineering, anything technical which requires a high level of math is a difficult job to fill in the United States. In construction management, generally speaking, we don't have a shortage. We can hire people, the United States can find people with construction management degrees. So the disadvantage you have if you're coming as a foreign student and your specialization is construction management, you're going to have more competition.
Yes.
And the option of getting sponsorship under that choice is less. Versus if you come, like, you know, I remember in the company where I worked, we had a guy who was working for us. He had a PhD in structures specializing in finite element analysis. And the guy was immensely brilliant. He was, I think he was Chinese. And he was immensely intelligent guy. His English was terrible. He could never be a project manager, but he loved to be in his cubicle and doing analysis all day long. And the company sponsored him. They kept him because number one, he was a team player and he was very good at what he did. And he was not demanding. He didn't expect anything. He just wanted to stay in the country and work. So he got his sponsorship, and I'm sure he's fully settled in now. That was about 15 years ago. So the preference for technical disciplines, it takes precedence over the management folks, because management folks are easier to find because the technical skill, although the salary is much higher, but there's more quote American, there's more citizens competing in that domain. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just go to any graduate school, pick any graduate school in the United States. You go to their technical PhD programs, and who are you going to find there? You're going to find Chinese people and Indian people. I mean, it's a fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Next question is almost in similar line. Like, how are the MS applications by structural engineers with 13 plus years of experience viewed by admission council?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about United States. We don't care about your age.
Hmm.
You know, in India, I remember my mother used to tell me after a certain age, you know, like you can't go back to school, and you have all these regulations. Like if you're 30 or something, you cannot go and pursue. I don't know. Maybe I'm out of date. You tell me if I'm wrong, but that's what my mom used to tell me, that,
Yes, yes.
you know, like after you're 25, you go try to apply for school. They say no because you're too old.
Hmm.
Am I right?
Yes, you are right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that stinks. Okay. That's a lousy rule. In America, we don't have that.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example of a friend of mine. This is a
Hmm.
nice little story. I have a friend
Hmm.
of mine. We were friends since high school, right? He's Indian. I mean, raised in the United States, but he's Indian.
Hmm.
His first name is Mark. I won't say his last name because he may end up watching this. So Mark graduated with a degree in engineering because his father was an engineer. And I'll be honest with you that Mark did not like engineering. He hated engineering. And he worked at one job and he worked at another job and he worked at, and it never worked out for him. He first of all, he didn't like it. And that's why I say go for what's in your heart. He didn't like it. And also his father took him to India, got him married, and he didn't like that either. So he was unhappy with his career and he was unhappy in his marriage. Okay. So what happened? He ended up getting a divorce, unfortunately. He did get a beautiful daughter out of that marriage. And at the age of, I think it was 37, he went back to school to pursue a medical degree. And he graduated from medical school. I think he was 42. Okay. And then he met a beautiful nurse and he got married again. And now he's very, very happy. But he went back to school past the age of 40. He went back to medical school, got admitted to medical school at the age of 40, which is to me unbelievable. Okay.
Hmm.
So the answer to the question is the US has open door policy.
Hmm.
When you go to a graduation ceremony, you will see people in their 60s getting a bachelor's degree. And there's
Yes.
no shame.
Which may be considered as a best university for earthquake engineering, in your opinion?
Well, I'm very biased on this one, so I'm going to give you two schools, which is obviously Caltech and USC, which is where I went.
Hmm.
So obviously, I have my preferences, but we've got to give some credit. UC Berkeley is a great school that's also in the top tier.
Yes.
So USC, UC Berkeley, Stanford is a very good school. MIT is a very good school. And there's also University in Buffalo, SUNY, State University of New York at Buffalo, which has an excellent earthquake engineering program.
Hmm.
There's also University of Nevada at Reno. So
Hmm.
there you have about 6 or 7 of the top schools in the country that do earthquake engineering.
Yes. Are there any types of scholarships available for financial support while pursuing this higher education in USA?
There used to be, but not anymore. Universities used to give,
Hmm.
but they only give financial support to PhD students now.
Hmm.
But you can apply for scholarships to our national organization, like American Society of Civil Engineers. The thing is that if you're coming as a foreign student, you're not going to get it because they're going to reserve that for citizens. So I have a lot of admiration for foreign students because, I mean, let me give you a quick example. Like if you go to Cal State LA, for example, if you go to a state college, I'll pick on Cal State LA because I went to school there. The tuition is around $8,000 a year for California residents. For foreign students from any part of the world, the tuition is like $17,000. It's more than double. At UCLA, UC Berkeley, the tuition for California residents is around $15,000 to $17,000 for the tuition only, not the living expenses. For international students, it's $27,000. Okay, so and there's no financial aid. And I have I'm actually producing a series. There's going to be a web series coming out where I've interviewed foreign students who have come to this country We have a couple students from Libya and from some other countries. There are scholarships available, but a lot of the foreign students end up paying the bill. It used to be that scholarship was available for foreign students. It was there 20, 30 years ago. Now it has become, first of all, it's become a highly political issue because, the local people, the American citizens are screaming that why would we give, tuition support to foreign students? So there's a lot of politics involved there. The short answer is it's very, very small and almost non-existent.
Yes. Now, how to get admitted into structural engineering for PhD program?
Well, so if you're coming with a master's degree, well, first thing is, okay, if you're coming from India and you have a master's degree from one of the top schools, then your chances and your ability to get admitted for a PhD program are much higher. If you're coming with a bachelor's degree, don't apply directly for PhD. You first have to apply for a master's, and then you have to prove yourself, and then from the master's you apply for the PhD. So don't try to jump from a bachelor's to a PhD program unless you're coming from, you're the top ranked student and you have a strong reference from a top school. You're coming from IIT or one of these big name schools. There are exceptions, but they're very small. In most cases, you're going to have to do your master's degree first. And then you want to go to one of the research-based schools, which was in that category A list that I provided in the handout.
Yes.
And then be ready. To live on pretzels for 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. The question is in similar line, that is it possible to get a PhD in USA from renowned university while coming from Cameroon, specifically in bridge engineering?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you where I was born.
Mm.
I was not born in India. I was born in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I came to the United States at the age of 3, so I am a fellow African.
Mm.
Okay? My father was in Africa for 7 years.
Mm.
We have many students from Nigeria, Cameroon, Egypt, Senegal.
Mm.
The one thing about the United States that I will say is a very welcoming country. We get 800,000 immigration applications a year. We admit more people than the entire European Union combined. And that's great. That's wonderful. That's what makes America a great country. Oh my goodness, we have people from all over the world here, don't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
So after graduation in Turkey, so do you think which way is better? Should I apply for master degree in USA, or I work in my country and after gaining some experience, I apply for job directly in USA companies?
Okay, so I'm going to say some things which I don't mean to be offensive, please. So excuse me, but the United States is very snobbish about experience, and so I get a lot of resumes, people who have had 10 years of experience in different parts of the world. We give very little value because we don't regard a lot of the countries as having the level of technical quality control that we have in this country. So the answer to your question is, if your goal is to come here, go straight for the master's program. I wouldn't bother. I mean, unless you need to make some money, I wouldn't bother. The experience is not going to get you any extra points on the application. What they want to see is your bachelor's degree, your scores, and your technical field of interest. I would go straight for the master's degree. Getting experience in that part of the world is not going to be of any much value unless you want to go work. If you want to work for an American company, then get your experience from a European company.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why. And I don't want to be rude to this person who's asking this question. I'll tell you why. Because every time there's been an earthquake in Istanbul, I've been to Istanbul, by the way, 4 times. And I've been to Turkey. I've traveled from Istanbul all the way to Iran by car and by bus. So I know Turkey very well. Every time there's been an earthquake in Istanbul, something like 50,000 people die. And because their construction standards have lots of issues. So coming with a resume of being like working for a Turkish developer is not going to help you because the reputation is not very good. And I know that's a very harsh thing to say, but it's the truth. And it's kind of ugly, but we have very, very bright people. I personally have hired people from Turkey who have worked for me, and they've been fantastic. But get your training here.
Yeah. Is there any disadvantage for a woman to work on the construction management field?
So officially, the answer is no. Unofficially, the answer is yes. Okay. Now, if you work in the U.S., you're the fact that you're a woman actually is going to be a huge advantage because right now the push to push women in the field is great, and so every woman in all disciplines, not just construction management, but in geotechnical, structural, all fields are getting promoted. It's actually it's a good thing. We need more women in the management field. So you will face some discrimination from your male colleagues, but don't pay attention to them. You will be lifted up, and probably you will reach higher levels faster than they are. Because right now in the U.S., there's a big push to have diversity. So it's a good time to be a woman right now. It's a great time in the United States.
Okay, Abhijit is asking, he's having master's degree in structural engineering from Mumbai, and he's a fellow of ISTRUCT UK. And he has worked in Middle East in an European company for around 20 years. Now, can he go for PhD program in the US in earthquake engineering? And if you can tell him how quickly he can go about it.
First of all, the answer is absolutely yes. Why not? Your experience here, from what I'm seeing, is really valuable. So what you need to do, if you want to go for PhD, again, go to the category of universities that I gave you, the category A, and research. I'll tell you one good thing about doing a PhD. There's no high demand to get in. Okay, as a matter of fact, they're looking for PhD students because it's such a difficult process. So you just need to be able to qualify. And in order to qualify, you have a very strong resume. You have a master's degree, which is wonderful. And you have all this experience from European and working in the Middle East. I don't think you should have a problem getting admission. You just need to pick the school that fits for you and has the right faculty advisor, and look at their research and see, there's different areas of earthquake engineering that you can specialize in. So find the school, find the professor, and the way you find them is you look at the papers that they've published, look at the research that they've done. And every professor that I have seen is accessible by email. So before you apply, you can email them and say, hey, this is me. I'm this person I want to pursue, and I really like your research. And most of the time, they will respond to you because they're looking for graduate students.
Yes. Some people take finance and management courses as their electives. So do you think that this is a good practice or approach? And then if not, which elective do you recommend while pursuing a master's degree in structural engineering?
So the answer is absolutely. This is a very good thing to do because at the end of the day, I personally, when I did my MBA, I have an MBA in finance, and that was because I was on the management track. And that degree has been of great value to me, not just in my profession, but also in my personal life. Because at the end of the day, in order to survive in this world, you've got to be able to manage your money. So between the two choices, between finance and management, I personally think finance is a better way. I mean, is more useful because it will teach you about interest. It will teach you about stock market. It'll teach you about investment. And if your goal is to own your own business, I run my own company. I always tell people, yes, I am an engineer. I always tell you, yes, I am an engineer. I love being an engineer. But in my profession as running a business, I'm first a businessman, second an engineer. Because first I have to pay the bills, I have to pay my employees, and I have to make money.
Yes.
So first I am an engineer. First I'm a businessman, second I'm an engineer. What does that mean? It means that if I get a project proposal, what's the first thing I do? I don't look at the work and say, oh, this is a beautiful work. I'm going to design this, whatever tower or whatever. No. First thing I look at is, does this client have enough money to pay me? Is this a project that's going to get done? Is this a project that is risk worthy? See, these are business decisions. If it passes those tests, then I will proceed to the next level. And yes, I love the engineering, but some projects, they don't fit. So I got to say no. Even though my heart wants to do them, but I got to say no. So the answer is, this is a very valuable skill. And these electives are very valuable to you. Dealing with people and learning how to write. But finance, yes, finance is a very well. So the answer is, that's a very, very good thing to do. And you're going to keep learning that for the rest of your life. It's not going to end when you finish the degree. You'll be studying finance and management forever. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Any quick thoughts related to online masters for the
Well, so this
profession?
is a new, so this is a new thing that has come up. It was never there when I was a student. I think it's a great thing. The only thing that I don't like about it is that, we are doing an online education right now, but I think, going to class, being with a professor, now that can be done on Zoom. We can achieve it, with a good professor, you can achieve results on Zoom. But that personal contact of actually knowing a professor and going to class, I think, is very valuable. Especially, I have had some wonderful professors in my life that have influenced me, that have done tremendous contribution to myself. And I always wanted to be one of those professors. And, it only takes one or two really good professors to change your outlook on life. So I encourage you to pursue it, but at the same time, try to seek out, in your profession, in your career, always try to seek out a mentor who you can converse with, who can advise you. It's really very valuable, because mentors are really irreplaceable. And so seek them out in where you work and where you go to school. They're there. There are mentors, good mentors out there. I had many mentors that helped me. And I try to return the favor. Because at the end of the day, I'm still Indian. I believe in karma.
Is it necessary or recommended or boost a profile for job to have EIT license after masters in structural engineering? And how easy or difficult to get these license for this?
So EIT is actually not, it is a certification. It's not a license, but it is the first step towards your PE. And so I tell everyone, if you're serious about your career and you really want to go somewhere, you've got to get the PE license. In order to get the PE license, you've got to do the EIT. Because companies, I'll tell you right away that when companies look to interview you, we have two categories. We have the non-PEs and we have the PEs. And the non-PEs will never, ever run a project. They can never become a principal or a partner. They cannot be the president of the company. There's no firm which has a non-PE as a president. Engineering firm. So you got to, now some people don't care. Some people say, I'm happy. I don't want to. I had a colleague of mine who I worked with. He was a PhD from UCLA, a brilliant, brilliant engineer. And he didn't want to have anything to do with management. He didn't want to have anything to do with budgets. He was very happy being in his office doing structural and dynamic analysis. And he said, I don't want to deal with any of this other, crap. So I'm happy being in my office and don't bother me with any of this. And that's fine. That's okay. He knew what makes him happy. So if that's your goal, you don't have to have it. It's not a requirement. See, the difference here's the big difference, which people don't realize, between engineering and the other two careers, which are very popular, which is medicine and law. In medicine, you are not a doctor unless you pass the license exam. Okay? You are not a doctor. You cannot call yourself a doctor. In law, you are not an attorney until you pass the bar exam. In engineering, you can be an engineer without getting the PE license. So we allow people to survive and make a living, and you can make a pretty decent living without ever getting the license. But in these other two careers, if you don't have the license, you're a nobody. At least in our career, in our profession, we have a place for everybody. So we have a place for people. It's not that you're not going to be unemployed. You will have a job. But if you want to rise, if you want to grow, you got to get that license. You got to get the EIT and you got to get the PE.
Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting question. Like, how to market ourselves during the masters to get a job, as there may be, let's say, no system of placement cell during, or let's say after the study.
Okay, so you're doing your master's degree, and you're okay. So first of all, I'm assuming that you're a foreign student, and so you're looking for company to sponsor you, is what I'm assuming. Because if you're a citizen, I can't imagine. I don't know anybody U.S. citizen with a master's degree in civil engineering that's not employed. They all get jobs. They may not get the job that they want, but they all have job offers. It's only when you don't have the citizenship. Okay, so you're a foreign student. So here's what you have to do, my friend. You have to be ready to go to the, don't expect to get your first job on the beach in Los Angeles working next to the ocean. You have to be ready to go to some places which other people don't want to go. So maybe your first job is to do training and they're going to send you to Alaska. Okay, so you have to go to Alaska, then go to Alaska, buy a coat and go. You got to give up something in order to start. And this is one thing I noticed by younger generation, you guys don't want to suffer. You want to have the Ferrari and you want to have the house now. Okay. You don't want to go through the pain, but you got to go through the pain, my friend. I mean, there are some people who can win the lottery. And of course, there are some careers where you can perhaps get that much faster, but you got to be ready to give up something. And there is a demand for entry-level civil engineers. Maybe not in California right away, but there is a demand, but you got to be ready to move. You got to be ready to go somewhere. Maybe it's North Dakota. In North Dakota, the temperature goes down to -50 in the wintertime. It's not pleasant, but hey, it's a start. You got to start somewhere. I personally would choose North Dakota over working in Afghanistan. That would be I would rather take I'll take North Dakota any day. Dubai is not a bad choice. Dubai has lots of opportunity. So you got to pick a spot and you got to go with the flow. You can't go in demand. You've got to be ready to accept. And one big advantage you have today is you have LinkedIn. You have people posting jobs on LinkedIn. We didn't have that 40 years ago.
Yes.
Here's the best way to get a job. Make friends with your faculty members. Go to professional society dinner meetings and just meet people. They're very friendly. And get an internship. That's the way you get in the door.
Yes. In software industry, skills really matter and people get hired by their technical skills rather than which college one has completed their study or experience. But in civil engineering, the colleges and experiences do matter.
Yeah, this is true. Because in software, by the way, the job that I did when I worked when I was a intern, my very first job was writing code. I worked in software for JPL NASA when I was a student. And I did that for about a year and a half, or I think it was a year. And I absolutely hated it. Okay. Because every day I would go to my desk and I had to write this software code. Oh my God, I realized then and there that I could never do this for a living. every day in the same room, in the same place, with the same window, with the same lunch, with the same computer, forget it. This is not for me. So that's a different type of person, people who write code. And there, you're not interacting with other people. It's you and the computer. It's you and the software program. Now, of course, what I was doing back then was a different code, but it's the same process. People who write code are different kind of people. And they're highly technical, and they're very proficient, and they're very, very good at catching details. Like in those days, it used to be, the difference between a comma and a period in your code could destroy the entire program. That's still the same. So in civil engineering, it's different, because in civil engineering, we're not just working with calculations. We're working with a building, working with an architect, working with a contractor. It's far more interactive. That's why I enjoy it.
Yes. How to decide masters in US or masters in Europe?
Well, that depends on where you want to live.
Yes.
Now, if you're going to go to Europe, you're probably going to have to learn another language. If you're going to work in France, you better speak French. If you're going to go to Germany, you got to speak German.
Yes.
You got to speak Italian if you're going to go to Italy, and you got to speak Spanish. So it depends on where you want to live. Europe is a beautiful place. I love Europe. Do I want to live there? No. But I love to go there. But I mean, I'm not going to go move over there.
Yes.
I have my reasons. I'm not saying that other people shouldn't consider it, but that depends on where you want to end up.
Currently, I am in second year of Masters in Geotechnical Engineering from NIT Jalandhar, and I want to apply for MS in Structural Engineering from USA for this 22 in Tech. So I just wanted to know if double masters would have any negative impact.
Well, normally people who have 2 master's degrees, the first thing that an employer thinks to themselves is like, why did this person do this? Okay. Now, so the immediate answer is that a second master's is, generally speaking, really not a worthwhile thing to do. But in this case, because you're coming as a foreign student, you kind of need to do the master's degree in the United States to establish a credential that's recognized in the U.S. Because it will be very hard for you to get hired with a master's degree directly from India, because, again, our standards are different, and you need to get trained. Now, you don't need to go to a big name school. If your goal is to work, you can go to a state college and get a very good master's degree in geotechnical and have a great career. So you don't have to go. I mean, again, if your goal is to do PhD and you want to be a professor, then of course you have to go to a top tier school. But if your goal is to work and get a nice job and have a good life, you don't have to do that. You can do just as well with a reasonably good degree from a good school.
Yeah. I'm pursuing MTech structures. Is it possible to pursue career in both market as well as academics at the same time?
Well, so when you say career in both markets, meaning the academic career and the professional industry?
Yes.
Well, I would say the answer to that is you need to know. I mean, the answer to that is you really need to pick one or the other. Now, in my case, I did pick initially that I was going to be a professor, and then I flipped. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay. And I don't regret it. But not everybody. See, here's what you don't want to do. If you want to pursue an academic career, that's a very, very different path. You need to really look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, is that really what I want? Because it is going to, I see the way they make orange juice in India. They take the orange and then they squeeze that orange, that's going to be you. Okay. They're gonna suck all the juice out of you, okay? Or the other example I give is, there are some places in India where what do they call them? The laundry person, the dobiwala. The way they take they take the clothes. I've seen them do it. They hit the thing on the stone, right, in order to wash the clothes. That's you. You're gonna be that, okay? For 5 years. Can you withstand that? Okay. Because it's not for everybody. Not for everybody. So why would you want to do both? Pick one. You don't have to do both. So I think I think this person needs a little bit of, as the yogi would say, self-realization. Needs to figure out who they are first before they go down that path.
Right. Is it possible to get PE license from US or UK for Indian engineer having work experience in Middle East projects? Because since a lot of Middle East companies are now looking for it.
Okay, so the requirements for the PE license, well, first of all, they don't have PE license in the UK. In the UK, they have what's called chartered engineer. And to get chartered engineer, that's a separate set of requirements, which honestly, for United Kingdom, I'm not totally familiar with all of them. I know to get chartered engineer license in Australia is very difficult. It took me about 5 months to get the license in Australia. I have 2 licenses in Australia. They're very picky. They do a full background check. For PE license in the United States, it depends on which state. We have 50 states. There's only one state where PE license is accepted by all the other 49 states, and that is California, because California has the highest requirements. I think the New York PE might be accepted also by other states, but California does not accept PE license from any other state. It might accept it from New York or Illinois, but not the other states. So you have to pick which state you want to get the PE license from, and then you have to go to that website. You can do it online, and they will tell you the requirements. Now, the problem you have is that if your experience is in the Middle East, in order to qualify to take the PE exam, first you have to pass the EIT. Then you need qualified, it's called qualifying experience, which can only be earned under the direction of another PE. So you may have 10 years of experience, but if you didn't work under a licensed PE, that experience is not qualifying. That's the difficulty there.
Right. Is it possible to get a job in USA with Indian experience and Indian masters in civil engineering, or is it necessary to do a master's or by clearing PE?
So this, again, I think I kind of answered this question.
Yes, same thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's the same answer, and that, unfortunately, the United States does not recognize degrees or experience from many parts of the world because, again, the difference in the construction standards. There are many people from the Philippines who come to the United States. They have degrees in engineering. Those degrees are not recognized by the U.S., so they have to start over again.
Yes. Okay, so let us take a last question, because already it is around 2 hours of time. Yeah. So is it possible to get a job in Canada after graduating from a US university in structural engineering?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the Canadians are a bit more protective because, remember, there's a huge population differential. United States population is 320 million. Population of California is 41 million. But Canada, the whole country of Canada, is 34 million. It's smaller than one state of California, right? Population of Mumbai is 20 million, okay? So Canada is like Mumbai and a little bit of maybe Maharashtra, and you got a whole country, right? Yes. So the Canadians are very, very selective about who they're going to hire. They prefer, obviously, to hire Canadians, but Canada is more welcoming at this moment than the United States for foreign graduates. There are a lot of Indians working in Canada. I would say the admissions process and the ability to get into Canada is probably easier than getting into the U.S. And there's a lot of opportunity. Because here's the thing about Canada. They get a lot of people that migrate to Canada, and it only takes about 3 winters before they leave because they can't stand the cold. Yes. But Canada has a huge oil industry that's booming up in the north, in the Yukon. It's cold. It's close to Alaska. But again, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. But I think it'll be easier for you to actually just go to Canada directly. You don't have to come to the U.S. to do that.
Yes. Okay. What is your idea about PG diploma programs in US or Canada?
So postgraduate diploma programs, those are like certificate programs. And again, it depends on what you're specializing in. If you're going to specialize like in construction management, we have those programs available and they're very effective. If you're looking for something in the technical discipline, the postgraduate or certificate in structural engineering, I don't even know what schools offer that. I don't think that that has any value. I think a master's degree is the one that's going to have value.
Yes.
But in like construction management and in certain disciplines, that we have a very nice assortment of postgraduate training programs that are available online. And what will happen is once you get started with a company, you're going to have to learn all the practical training because there's no school that teaches you everything. You only get about maybe 15% of practical training at the state colleges. At the big name universities, you walk out with zero. They have very little practical training. The graduates who come out of UC Berkeley, who are fabulous students and wonderful, intelligent people, but they have no training on how to design a real building. You have to teach them everything. As a matter of fact, I have to spend more time with a person from Berkeley or from Caltech than I do for a student who comes out of Cal State LA. The Cal State LA student is better equipped for practical. For university research, totally different question.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we good?
Yeah. Yeah. So already close to 2 hours now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
I hope the audience got something out of it.
Yeah. Audience have really enjoyed it, and there are many interesting questions which were shared by them. So thanks a lot for sparing your valuable time. And it is it's a midnight time at your end, right? So
yes.
So have a good night. Yeah.
Okay. I thank you very much.
Yeah.
I wish you all very good luck.
Yeah.
I'll come to India very soon, and I hope I can run into a few people.
Yeah. Sure. Definitely. Most welcome to India. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we are closing this broadcast now. Okay. And thank you all for raising very interesting questions so that we could answer them. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.